Niners faithful, just when you thought the roster was settling into its final form before training camp, the offseason keeps delivering new storylines that remind you exactly why John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are never truly finished shaping this team until the first game kicks off. Today, we have got two major stories that every faithful 49ers fan needs to understand completely. Because together they paint a picture of a front office that is still actively managing assets, still monitoring elite talent on the trade market, and still making decisions that could dramatically alter the ceiling of this football team before Week 1 arrives. We are talking about the former 49ers who could make football sense as reunion signings. The ones who absolutely do not make sense despite the nostalgia, the Max Crosby trade rumors that keep refusing to go away despite the organizational silence surrounding them, and the Mac Jones situation that could turn the backup quarterback into one of the most valuable trade chips John Lynch has available between now and the start of the regular season. Let us get into every piece of this right now. Start with the former 49ers reunion conversation, because this is where organizational intelligence meets roster construction reality, and the honest assessment of who makes sense and who does not reveals something important about how this front office approaches the late off-season roster-building process. Daniel Brunskill is the reunion that makes the most football sense of any available option, and the specific context of the left guard competition makes the conversation particularly timely. The 49ers are currently planning for Carver Willis, Connor Colby, and Brett Toth to compete for that starting left guard job, which is a competition involving players who have not yet established themselves as reliable NFL starters at that position. Brunskill played tackle, guard, and center with genuine competence from 2019 through 2022, giving the coaching staff a player who understands Kyle Shanahan's blocking scheme at a cellular level and who can contribute at multiple positions without requiring extensive installation time. The Mike McDaniel connection at Miami adds an interesting layer to the Brunskill evaluation, because McDaniel using him as a blocking tight end in certain offensive packages demonstrates exactly the kind of versatility that a Shanahan-influenced offensive system prizes above almost everything else at the offensive line position. You are not bringing Brunskill in to be a Pro Bowl guard. You are bringing him in because he understands the system, he can play multiple positions when the injury bug inevitably strikes, and his experience against elite defensive talent, including Aaron Donald during their NFC West battles, gives him a specific preparation value that younger linemen simply cannot replicate. The Aaron Donald retirement news makes his ability to go toe-to-toe with arguably the greatest defensive tackle of all time slightly less relevant than it would be if Darnold were returning to the Rams, but the mentality and the technique that allowed Brunskill to compete against that level of talent is exactly what you want in your offensive line depth. Trent Taylor is the second reunion that makes quiet but genuine sense, and the reasoning is the kind of organizational logic that does not generate headlines, but that matters enormously when the season gets long and the injury report gets crowded. Taylor spent 2024 on the practice squad and missed all of 2025 on injured reserve, which means his on-field contributions in recent seasons have been minimal. But his value to this organization has never been purely statistical. He knows the system as well as anyone who is not currently a starter or a coach. He can contribute on special teams and specifically in the punt return game, where his experience provides a reliability floor that rookies and young players cannot guarantee. When injuries pile up and the wide receiver room gets thin, having a player you can elevate from the practice squad without spending 5 minutes explaining the route tree to him is the kind of organizational asset that championship-caliber teams maintain quietly and gratefully. The phone call costs nothing, and the upside is real. The reunions that do not make football sense deserve equal honesty, even though they involve players whose contributions to this franchise were genuinely meaningful and genuinely memorable. Raheem Mostert's 2019 playoff run against the Packers is one of the most electrifying individual performances in 49ers postseason history. And no honest evaluation of what he meant to this organization during that stretch diminishes what he delivered. But football moves fast. Mostert is 34 years old, and 104 rushing yards with the Las Vegas Raiders last season is not a statistical line that suggests the burst which made him so dangerous is still there at a level that benefits an NFL roster. The 49ers have Jordan James and Keelan Black developing behind McCaffrey, and those reps belong to players who represent the future rather than the past. Jimmy Ward is the other name that nostalgia might tempt fans toward, but that organizational responsibility requires declining. The legal accusations surrounding him make the conversation more complicated than a simple football evaluation would suggest, and combined with the fact that he has not played since 2024, the case for bringing him back simply does not hold up against the standard the 49ers should be applying to every roster decision at this point in the process. Now let us talk about Max Crosby, because this is the story that has been simmering beneath the surface of the 49ers offseason for months, and that the rumors keep refusing to let die regardless of how settled the situation seems to appear on the surface. The reporting from The Athletic at the NFL Scouting Combine established clearly that San Francisco was among approximately a dozen teams monitoring Crosby's situation with the Las Vegas Raiders, and that the Raiders were willing to engage in trade discussions if the right package materialized. Crosby's track record is genuinely elite. Double-digit sacks in 3 of the last 4 seasons. 69.5 career sacks over 7 NFL seasons. And the kind of consistent pressure generation that opposing offensive coordinators have to specifically design their game plans around every single week. The Bleacher Report hypothetical trade proposal involving a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and Mekhi Williams coming off his ankle recovery is the framework that establishes what the conversation looks like in terms of asset value. From the Raiders' perspective, they are receiving a future first-rounder, a premium second-round asset, and a former first-round pick who simply needs to get healthy, all while continuing their rebuild with resources rather than a veteran pass rusher whose best years are presumably behind him as the team pivots toward its next competitive window. From the 49ers' perspective, the math becomes the question that matters most, and it is a question that only John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan can answer with full information about what they believe this team needs to reach the Super Bowl. The football argument for making the Crosby trade is straightforward and genuinely compelling. Nick Bosa returning healthy from his ankle is the most important single development for this 49ers defense in 2026, but Bosa alone is not the pass rush transformation that makes opposing offensive lines lose sleep at night. Which means any deal requires San Francisco to be the aggressor in negotiations that may not find a willing partner at an acceptable price. The draft capital required is significant for a team that needs to continue building depth and developing young talent across the roster. And the Williams with a torn ankle component of the proposed package introduces a variable that every team in the league will evaluate carefully before accepting as part of a blockbuster deal. These are not trivial objections. They are the legitimate considerations that distinguish smart, aggressive front offices from reckless ones. The Mac Jones situation is the subplot that keeps gaining complexity rather than resolving toward a clean conclusion, and the Eric Branch reporting from the Chronicle adds the most concrete framework yet for understanding what the decision actually hinges on. Everything depends on Chris Rourke. If Rourke demonstrates through training camp and preseason that he has developed into a legitimate backup who can step into the starting role and keep the 49ers competitive if Purdy goes down, then Mac Jones becomes a trade asset worth exploring rather than an insurance policy worth keeping. Jones's performance last season, 69.5% completion rate, 2,151 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions over a 5-3 run as starter, establishes his market value as a player who is demonstrably more than a roster filler. The gap between what the 49ers reportedly hope to receive, a first-round pick, and what the market appears willing to offer, a second- or third-round selection, is significant but not necessarily deal-killing if the right situation emerges. Cleveland and New York are the logical destinations mentioned in the reporting, and both represent organizations that have genuine and documented need at the quarterback position and sufficient draft capital to make a real offer. The Arizona connection is the one that the 49ers would never consider regardless of the return, because trading a legitimate starting caliber quarterback within the NFC West is exactly the kind of organizational gift that championship caliber front offices do not give their division rivals, regardless of how attractive the compensation might look. What all of this adds up to is a picture of a front office that is still actively and intelligently managing this roster rather than simply waiting for the season to begin. Quiet depth additions like Brunskill and Taylor are the kind of organizational discipline that separates teams who are ready for adversity from teams who are surprised by it. The Crosby monitoring keeps the most aggressive roster improvement option available rather than closing the door prematurely on a move that could be transformational. And the Jones situation gives Lynch a genuine asset to deploy if Rourke earns the backup role or if a team becomes desperate enough to meet a reasonable price. This 49ers offseason is not finished. And if the history of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan's front office decision-making tells us anything, the best move they make between now and Week 1 is probably the one that nobody outside the building currently sees coming. Tell us in the comments whether you pull the trigger on the Max Crosby trade or stay patient with the current roster. Let us know what you would do with Mac Jones if a legitimate offer came in, and drop your prediction for whether Daniel Brunskill ends up back in San Francisco before training camp opens. Smash that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and we will see you for the next one. Niners faithful,